hybrid diploma program from Aditya Birla World Academy, Mumbai. Then she pursued her interest in business management by continuing her studies at our very own HR College, Mumbai, and later completed her master's in management at London Business School. She also serves as a board member on the LBS Women in Business Asia Alumni Club and the LBS Mumbai Alumni Club. Welcome on board, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, also requesting everyone, if you can please switch on your cameras. We could have a more interactive session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here. If we can just move the slides before I begin. Okay, so guys, today I'm going to be talking about one of the most important aspects of a consulting interview, which is a fit interview. And then we'll move on to understanding a bit more about how consulting team works and how client interaction actually happens. At any point in time, just feel free to raise your hands, put in questions in the chat box, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Let's try and make this as interactive as possible. And I'm going to be sharing some of my personal experiences here as well. So if there's anything that you don't understand, that you need me to repeat, just feel free to point it out. So now starting off with, before we go on to what does a fit interview assess, like why do consulting companies actually conduct a fit interview when they have such a rigorous case interview process anyway, and which you guys heard about last week. So, most people might think that you're trying to understand whether this person will fit into the companies, understand company values, company culture, etc., which happens with most traditional companies. However, in a consulting setup, while that's important, what's more important is to understand whether you as a candidate fit into the role of a consultant. They try to assess whether you have the personality that and a character that takes to deliver a real life challenging consulting project, and at the same time represent the firm. So we'll talk more about how do they actually assess these things. So you can see this diagram here. There are four things, and each firm has specific, very very specific characteristics that they keep in mind when evaluating a candidate's personality and character, but they can be actually put into these four categories over here. And what I mean by them is starting off with the first one, which is performance and communication. They try to understand if you have a track record of making an impact, performance track record, which means that they want to ensure that whether you have a track record of making an impact as a top performer in a demanding environment. And now, how can you actually show this? So there's some ways in which you can show this is through your college experience, through your internship experience, or through any past work experience. So you have to ensure that you communicate it to them in a way that you're coming across as somebody who's a top performer in whatever you may have done. It may have been leading this club, for example, a 180 degrees consulting club, being a part of any other college event, taking on any internship, and actually taking on a high level of responsibility at that internship, doing a side project of your own, having your own mini entrepreneurial venture, or it could be something as simple as taking on a leadership position in college. So through each of these, you need to ensure that your performance as a leader, as an individual, is high, and you need to demonstrate that through your interview. Then the second thing is transferable abilities. What I mean by that is that now through all these experiences which you're going to talk about, where you've performed well, where you've done these really cool big things, they want to understand whether your skills that you gained were only relevant to that particular task, or you've actually built yourself in a way that you've acquired transferable skills. And these things could include simple things like basic communication skills, your ability to work in a team, your ability to adapt to different situations, just how to work under pressure. So while when there are college festivals, college events, there is always last minute pressure. There is always something that goes wrong last minute, something that needs to be changed last minute. And that is something that when you are a part of an institution like HR college, you kind of get accustomed to dealing with. Like, there's nothing new, because that's something that always happens. And that's not just about HR college, that pretty much happens everywhere when you're trying to organize or work on something large scale. And that these are the kind of examples that you have to bring out to tell them that, look, this was the situation that I worked on, these are the skills I've acquired, which I can now use in any setting, and I bring these to your organization. And then the third thing is actually motivation, like where they want to see people who are genuinely motivated to be a part of consulting, to be a part of a particular organization. And you need to have a very, very clear, logical and convincing rationale to understand why you want to make that as your next career move, or why you want to work with a particular company. And how do you actually do this? You do this by doing enough research about that company, going through their website, blogs, videos, speaking to people who are working there, speaking to people who used to work there, asking them, okay, what are the three things that differentiates this firm from any other firm? So here we're looking at two separate questions. One is why consulting, and the other one is why this particular firm. And you have to be smart enough to sort of identify a way to integrate both of these, saying like, hey, I'm interested in consulting because of ABC, but more specifically to work with your company because I feel that it will like some examples here could be that it will set me up for success. There is a steep learning curve here. The culture of the firm is something that I really resonate with, and I will fit into. The sector that this firm specifically focuses on is something that is of my particular area of interest, or anything, but anything that is logical and convincing at the same time. And the last thing here that it assesses is your presence and communication. So these interviews will really, really keep you on your feet. You have to listen to every word carefully. They will throw questions at any time, anyhow. Like, if I'm to recollect one of my interview experiences with a consulting firm about 3 years ago, I was asked to describe a situation where I had to work in a team. So I was talking about like one of my internship experiences and saying that, hey, my manager gave me this work, this is what we were working on. The interviewer stopped me and said, hey, what was the name of your manager? So now these are the kind of tricks which they use to see whether you're bluffing or whether you're really talking sense. So you have your presence of mind has to always be there. You have to always think on your feet. And in such kind of answers, if you are not able to answer within 5 seconds, they just think that, okay, they were lying, or, this is not true. Because a lot of these top companies, they don't really believe in cross-checking with like certificates or experience letters. They really believe in only testing your abilities. So through your presence, physical and mental presence during the interview, and the way you communicate what's on your mind, is something that they will really assess. Because as a consultant, communication is one of the topmost skills that you need to have. It's a completely client driven industry. You will be working more with the client than with people in your own organization. So these are some of the things that a fit interview really assesses. Now we'll move on to understanding that, okay, how do I best answer this? But before that, let me take a pause and ask if anybody has any questions at this point. Okay, looks like no questions. So let's move on to understanding how do you answer a question during a fit interview? How do you ensure that you tick all these boxes that they're looking for? A quick hack to this is what I like to call the star interview method. This is a really, really famous interview approach, which, you Google about it, you'll find it everywhere. But what's difficult is to how do you actually put this into action? And I'll give you some examples for that. But before that, what does this really mean? You need to start off by telling them about a situation. So you need to give context, then tell them about, what is it that you were doing in that particular event, organization, etc. And then move on to telling them about what did you do. These were my responsibilities. This is what I did. And then the last thing and the most important thing is the result. What was the impact? What was the outcome of all your actions? So let me give you an example. If somebody is to ask you that, tell me about a time when you were a leader. So I will say that, I'm going to talk about a time when I was pursuing my bachelor's in management studies at HR College of Commerce and Economics in Mumbai, and I was heading college club called 1000x. And what my responsibility was to organize an event which saw a footfall of over 100 students, and the aim of the event was to teach people real life entrepreneurial skills through a 1 day mock exercise. How did my team and I achieve this was that we put each of these students into groups. We gave them a certain sum of money, and they were expected to come up with a business idea and sell that and ensure that they multiply their money through a course of 8 hours. And what resulted through this entire event was that our winning team actually multiplied 1,000 rupees to 40,000 rupees in those 8 hours. And what all our participants learned through this event was they improved not only their entrepreneurial skills in terms of learning how to initiate ideas. They also learned about risk taking appetite. They also learned about how to work in a team, and they also learned about how to interact with external stakeholders, including customers, suppliers, through each of their individual small mini ventures. And at the end of this project, we circulated a feedback form, and we got over 95% ratings from all our students. So successfully, we were able to execute this 1 day event, which was a huge success. So if you see over here, I'm trying to quantify everywhere. I am trying to break my answer into sections, but the way I'm communicating it is that it seems like I'm just talking. I'm not really saying, hey, I'm talking about this is the situation. This was the task I was doing. This are the actions I took. No, it needs to come across very, very subtly. But in your mind, you need to check all these four factors. And by doing this, what you're ensuring is that you don't leave any room for any interpretation. You don't leave any room for the interviewer to think that, oh, like she just worked on this, but this seemed like they achieved nothing. Oh, but I don't understand what is it that she exactly did in this. So you leave no room for interpretation. You leave no room for any miscommunication, and it kind of covers all your bases, and it really ensures that you communicate everything you need to. So this is literally the secret formula to interviewing, not just for a consulting interview, for any interview you have to do going forward, be it a B-school interview, be it a interview for any other job. Every time they ask you a question about telling them about a situation, any situation, telling them about your internship, telling them about your event, telling them about your college experience, telling them about anything, try to fit it in these four categories, and trust me, your answers will become way more structured. You will feel way more at ease, and you will never miss out on an important point that you should be saying. And as a consultant, I would say that structure is everything. If you cannot get your structure right, you cannot be a consultant. So this really puts you in that rhythm of becoming a good consultant, and you display that structural sense through answering your questions in this way. So I hope I was clear on that. Before and with this, I'd like to sum up the aspect about how one should answer case interviews, why they're important, and fit interviews and why they're important. These interviews are not just specific to consulting. These are also called behavioral interviews. Some companies like McKinsey also like to call it a personal experience interviews. So it may be called, they may have different names, but the crux of it lies in the same sort of arena. I think in the brochure you guys must have received, there is a huge list of questions. If you all prepare on all of them, trust me, 90% of questions in a consulting interview will come from there. So make sure that you go through it. Even right now, if you all have any questions regarding that, I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or feel free to put it in the chat box. Okay, no questions. Looks like everybody has got this right. Would you all like to do a quick exercise? I can ask a few questions. You can
Uh,
volunteer to answer,
I,
and
I had a doubt. I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
go ahead.
Yeah. So there's this one thing, like every time in an interview, when you're asked how, like tell something about yourself, and the interview could be anything, like it could be a club interview or a corporate interview. So what's the perfect way to start? Like, do you start with a quote? Do you use rhetorics? Do you use something sassy and modest?
No, I think it kind of depends on the context, but I can give you like a sort of standard structure which you can then customize based on what you're interviewing for. So, say like you're interviewing, so especially if you're interviewing for an internship or a job, or like speaking to any external client, and when they say, so okay, they might say, tell me something about yourself. They might say, walk me through your CV. They might say something like, why don't you describe yourself, or something which in all of these answers pretty much have a similar structure. How I'd usually recommend doing this is that, say, that hey, I'd like to start, just to give a brief about myself. I'm currently a student at HR College of Commerce and Economics, pursuing my bachelor's in management studies. Prior to this, I've completed my schooling from XYZ College, and I originally come from Mumbai, or I originally come from Delhi, wherever. Apart from that, my interests lie in finance, and more specifically in investment banking. And I have done a few internships in the past with XYZ firms within this domain. And lastly, to sum this up, in my free time, I also am a swimmer and I like gardening. Okay, this is obviously all hypothetical, me just giving examples. But again, try to give it a structure. Start off by talking about yourself academically. This is what I'm currently doing. This is what I did in the past. Professionally, this is where my interest lies, and this is how I've pursued them. And lastly, personally, this is where my interest is. And in a case where supposing you're like, say you're interested in investment banking and you're interviewing for an investment banking internship, then when you talk about it professionally, you say that, I'm interested in this is what I've done so far, and I'd love to further my knowledge going forward by interning with your company, or by being an intern at XYZ place. So try to customize it based on the situation. If you're interviewing for a club, you can elaborate a bit more on your academic path, saying, as a student at this college for the past 2 years, I have participated in XYZ events and so club and contributed in this way. And now I'm looking forward to being a part of your club. And apart from that, and then, you can concise your professional bit, because that might not be the most relevant there. So ideal structure: talk about your academics first, then your professional bit, and then your like interests or hobbies, and then sort of play around with it based on the situation. So as a student, this is the structure I would suggest for your internships, for your first jobs, for your club interviews, for anything. However, going forward, when you start, when you have like 1-2 years of work experience, and then when you're more into the workforce, I would switch it up by then putting your professional aspect first, and then academic, and then personal. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it clearly does. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, great.
Yeah. Hi, Sharmi. So I just had one question before we could move on to the next segment. So
Yes.
while you were having a discussion, you also mentioned that when you're supposed, if I'm looking at the star method, when you're talking about the task which was given to you or the action which you took over the task, sometimes the interviewer even suggests that, sometimes the interviewer even suggests that I guess what you did was wrong, or you could have taken XYZ step to go ahead with it. So how are you supposed to respond to such questions? Because like honestly, you're kept in a very awkward position when the interviewer suggests what you could have done in the past.
Yeah, so now there are two things to this. Okay, this could be a genuine feedback that the interviewer is giving you, sometimes if he or she is nice, and this could also be a trick question. In a case where it's a trick question, they're trying to see whether you stand your ground, whether if when a client comes to you and says that, hey, I don't think this is correct, you shouldn't have done it this way, are you able to justify yourself, and are you able to stand your ground in a polite manner without offending the other person? And in a case where you may have genuinely missed out on something, or you may have genuinely made a mistake, are you able to own up to it? So the correct way to actually answer that would be like, hey, thank you for that, that's really interesting, can I take a moment to actually think about it? So take 30 seconds to yourself, reflect on it, and use your judgment to see whether what the interviewer is saying is making more sense than what you've actually done. In a case where it is, you can say that, now that you're putting this into perspective, I really think that that may have been a slightly better approach, and will definitely keep it in mind going forward. And in a case where you feel that, no, the interviewer is really not making sense, you say that, thanks for that suggestion. However, knowing the dynamics of my client, or knowing the dynamics of my team, I think this was the best suited approach, because they may have not reacted in the best way to that approach. So there, you're not trying to say that he's wrong. You're trying to say that I know my team better, and I know my workplace and the dynamics better, and that's why I took this approach. So never try to like counter or challenge the interviewer in a way. You have to be as polite as possible in a situation where you don't know what to say. You can always be like, oh, this is an interesting question, this is a great question, let me just think about it for a moment, can I just get 30 seconds to gather my thoughts, can I get a second to structure my thoughts? So these are phrases which will sort of intuitively come once you get in the rhythm of it, once you practice a little bit. But try to be very, very polite. Don't, like, always have a flowing conversation. Don't just like go blank, don't just go quiet. Even if you are nervous, even if you don't he's thrown something out of the blue, you have no answer to it, take time to gather your thoughts. It's better to take that time than to blabber something which makes no sense. The reason being that at that time they're assessing that if a client throws a random question to which you as a consultant don't have an answer, how will you deal with it? And as a good consultant, how you deal with it is say that, hey, this is an interesting observation, give me some time, I'll just check with my team and come back to you on that. When you don't know anything, you should, as a consultant, it's always about under promising and over delivering. And that same sort of psyche is something that you have to apply even in your interviews. So don't say something you're not sure of, don't quote something you're not sure of. And in a case where you absolutely can't think of anything, it is absolutely okay to say that, I don't really have an answer to this right now, but I'll definitely reflect on this after our conversation.
Makes sense. Thank you so much.
No worries. So anybody, any other questions? Okay, great. Should we spend like 5 minutes? Maybe I can ask somebody a question. You guys can answer it following this method, and I can give some feedback. We could do one or two questions that might, would be like a live case study for everybody here. Are you all up for doing that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, sure, let's do that. I guess someone can volunteer if they're interested.
Yeah.
So my first question would be that tell me about a time where you've led a group in your college. Simple question. Anybody wants to volunteer? I mean, otherwise I may have to start cold calling. Then we'll know whether you're actually paying attention.
Okay, I think I would like to go with this. Can I go ahead?
Yes.
So I remember that we had this one whole event in the Public Speaking and Debating Society, which was called the Talk of the Town. And that was my first year in college, quite ironically. I've never been to college, and that was an online event. And we carried out, we called a few bloggers and influencers. Yeah, that's how it went. We had an audience of around 200 to 300 people. And that was a Zoom event, but we quite enjoyed it.
And what was the objective?
So basically, that was an open mic thingy, where the objective was promoting art. So that's right.
And at the end of it, what is it that you as an organizer achieved?
Okay. So the one thing that I learned there was that when you're coordinating people from different arenas and from different genres of performing, like when you have someone who's a musician and at the same time you have someone who's a theater artist and you coordinate all of them together, the one thing that you need to realize is all of them belong to different genres and you can't limit art. So you cannot probably have a theme or a particular motive for everyone to work on the same lines, and that tells me about an organization that everyone can have the different work ethic, but what's important is to coordinate as a leader.
Got it. Great. Thanks. Thanks for volunteering, Ria. Okay, some quick feedback here is that, starting off, yes, you tried to put it in all of this, but a little bit more detail would have helped. So if you would have told me what was the name of the event to begin with, it's always good to say that I'm going to talk about a time when I was leading an event called XYZ during my first year in college. This event was aimed at, what was the event, right? You're describing the context. So what was the event? This event was aimed at promoting art, and as a part of that event, what was the task? You organized this online open mic event. And how did you do it? What actions did you take?
Right.
You set up like an online platform, like say you set up Zoom, you sent out invites, you got in registrations, whatever it is that you did, and then came to the results. So then say, after putting in all this hard work, we eventually could call it a successful event, and we saw a footfall of over 100 participants. And personally, I also think that the outcome I achieved as a leader was that I learned more about whatever the few learnings that you had. So when it's talking about result and outcome, yes, it's important, it's the most important to talk about what outcome you achieved out of that event, but you can also talk about what did you achieve for yourself, what were your learnings. So but great first attempt. I think in interest of time, I am going to move forward, and if we have more time at the end, we can get back to this. Can we go to the next slide? Great. So now, talking a bit more about, what does a consulting environment really look like? Why is it important to have leadership and good communication skills within a consulting environment? And what are some of these skills? So before I move on to what these skills are, when you are a consultant, you may be the most junior person in your company, but when you are representing the company to your client, there might be days where your team is not there. There might be occasions where you are individually talking to the client, or you're individually handling something. And hence, it's really important to always think of yourself as a leader. Think of yourself as somebody who has been given the responsibility and ownership of a particular project. And so your seniority hierarchy really doesn't matter. Everybody in a consulting environment is a leader in their own way, and it's really important to use your college years, use this time, use these opportunities to basically acquaint yourself with all of that, to learn more about all of that, to hone these some of these important skills. To begin with is that you need to have the ability to adapt your communication style based on client needs. Now what I really mean by that is that your client can be the beauty of consulting, what I would say, is that you really work with any and every sector, right? You can literally work with a fashion company, you can work with an investment bank, you can work with the government, you can work with an oil refinery, you can work with a steel manufacturing company, you can literally work with anybody and everybody, and every project is different from one another in terms of what the scope of that project is, what the industry is, what the people are like. Everything is completely different, and what that means is that you as an individual need to continuously keep evolving and adapting, and specifically when it comes to your communication needs. Now there might be some clients that literally prefer everything particularly documented, and they want every single thing on email. They want meetings to be pre-scheduled, might be some clients that really want you to be available whenever they want you to be available. They want to communicate on WhatsApp. They want to keep getting on calls again and again. There might be some clients who are very sophisticated, very politely spoken, and there might be some clients who are very like, harsh. They are not well spoken. They don't respect your time. They don't respect your efforts. They might just dismiss everything you're giving. They might not give you adequate feedback. They might not work with you at the right time, etc., etc. So a lot of these things keep changing from client to client, and what's important is that you have to adapt. That is the expectation. I wouldn't say it's the best thing. I wouldn't say that is the way things need to be, but unfortunately, in marketing they say customer is the king, like the consumer is the king. Here the client is the king. It's literally how it works. Like, it is because the client is paying you, you have to do whatever the client needs you to do and however they need you to do. So that's the first point. The second point would be active listening. There are times when the client will really say that, oh, I mentioned this to you the other day, why is it not done? We spoke about that particular KPI, etc., etc., why is it not done? And they obviously, when there's a huge meeting happening, there's a lot of information exchange. You might miss out on some information. So the best way is to always keep actively listening and noting things down, always taking down minutes, always noting things down. You don't always have to share these minutes with the client unless required, but for your personal reference, for the team's reference, you should keep. And it's about active listening, not just in meetings. It's about also observing the client's tone, observing their body language, and trying to see if they feel comfortable with you. It's about making them comfortable in a way that they can then trust you. So all these things sort of play a role there. Then the third thing is transparency. I think the more transparent you are with a client in terms of their expectations, in terms of what you are able to deliver, in terms of what you're not able to deliver, it's the best. Do not overpromise. Don't say that, oh, you will have this by next week, if you know that it's not going to be possible. It's best to be transparent to them in a polite way, saying, hey, I understand that we're all working on tight timelines, but given my team's bandwidth currently, this will not be possible, and we will need at least 2 weeks to complete this project. So you have to be transparent. You cannot set wrong expectations. The moment you set wrong expectations, it is going to fire back on you one day. It's going to go up to your partner, to higher level management, and you might potentially lose that time. So the only way is to actually be transparent, tell them exactly where you're at, what you're doing, and continuously keep them in a loop. Like, do a check-in every few days, send an update every few days, so they know what you're doing. The next thing is clarity. So this is very important in your initial few client meetings. Now, this is probably important in every setting, right? Even in college, when you're working as a part of a club, you have a club leader, and the leader tells you to do something. If you don't clearly understand what he or she expects you to do, you're going to do the wrong thing, or you're going to have an incomplete task. So hence, spending some time in clearly identifying client expectations and clearly identifying what the problem statement is, in ensuring that you're both on the same page, is very important. So clarity of thought, structure, communication is really important. And next thing is the ability to ask open-ended questions. Now, this is an art. In consulting, they say it's not about identifying the problem, it's about asking the right questions, because till you don't ask the right questions, you don't get the right answers. So over time you will learn, okay, what are the kind of questions to ask. I would for example, it's about asking, not asking binary questions, not asking a yes or no questions. If you ask them that, oh, are you making good profits, they will say no. Oh, do you have a good marketing team? No. But the right way to ask is that, Why do you think your profits are declining? Why are you not making enough profits? Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Then they might say, oh, because our sales are going down. Why do you think the sales are going down? Is this an industry trend, or is this just the case with your company? Can you elaborate a bit more on that? So continuously asking follow-up questions, deep diving into every small thing till you reach the root cause. So it's having the ability to ask the right questions, framing them in the right way, and also being very sure that you're not demeaning them or demeaning their organization in any way. There might be a time where a client has a horrible reputation, but you don't say that out loud. You don't tell them that, oh, why do you have such a bad reputation outside, like what's going on. You instead ask them saying, oh, can you tell me what has the company been doing so far in their PR efforts, and what are your plans for improvement. So always have a positive connotation to all your questions, to your all your conversation, and avoid being negative in any way. The next thing is empathy. So, like all of us, when we're working, when we're students, there are tons of things happening, right? We will have a teacher who has expectations, we'll have a club leader who has expectations. In a work setting, we have bosses who have expectations. So, and in a consulting environment, what happens is that every time you're working on a project with a particular client, there is a certain point of contact that they give you, or a certain manager that you kind of directly work with. Now, that think about where that person is coming from. He may or she may be given directions from top management, from his or her bosses. He or she may be under a lot of other work pressure, a lot of other deadlines. So always be empathetic. Try to let them know that you understand where they're coming from, and you're only here to help them. Once you establish that factor very well, trust me, they will only be more helpful, because by helping you, they are in turn helping their own organization. So, and this really helps when you're trying to get like data from the client, information, approvals, access. I think that relationship building is something which plays key. So in your initial days, it's really important to always put yourself in the other person's shoes, think about what they must be going through, what they must be thinking, and then acting upon it. Next thing is open body language. Don't show that you're reserved. Don't show that you're not open to new ideas. Always have a smile on your face no matter what they say. Greet them with a smile, firm handshake when you're presenting, use hand actions, show that you're somebody who is coming there with the requisite knowledge, with the requisite abilities to execute that project. Have the confidence which comes across through your body language. And the last thing is receiving and implementing feedback. So now feedback is extremely important, and one needs to always be open to feedback. So now, the client is in running their company for years and years. You are a third party that's coming in to help them. You always keep in mind that they know more about their work than you do. So when they tell you that they want something changed, or they don't like something, you have no option but to do it, because it's their organization and it's not yours. So they always be open to feedback, always find a way to implement feedback. And there might be times when the client might ask you to do something from scratch, and the sad truth is that you have to do it, even if that extends the project, even if it requires longer hours. You have to do it. There are times when there is miscommunication there, where the POC has told you something else, and then the top management comes and says, but this is not what we wanted, like, can we do this? And you just have to stick by it. You have to be open to feedback. And what this will happen, this usually happens in your first one or two projects with any client, but over time you understand their working style, you understand the hierarchy, and how that organization and its systems function. And then you find a way to work around it in a way that you don't always have to redo your work. But these are some things which are really important to be able to retain a client. So client retention is one of the most important factors for any consultancy, because it's not just about finishing a particular project with the client, it's using that as an opportunity to get another project. So that client retention is something that always has to be at the back of your mind. If I do this, will we lose the client? And anything that makes you feel like, oh, like this might go down south, absolutely don't do it. Yeah, that's about it on some of the necessary skills. Before I move on to the next slide, any questions here?
Sharmi, hi. So again, thanks a lot for this list. I think it's pretty comprehensive. I was just wondering if you could either right now or later on touch upon like a client situation where you had to kind of deal with a difficult client and how you went about approaching it.
Sure, I'll come to that later. Right now let's go to the next slide. I'll address that in a bit.
Sure.
Cool. So here we will talk about, okay, how does a consulting team actually work, and what does it mean to have teamwork within a consulting team. So what this image represents, you can see there are all kinds of people here. Like in any consulting setup, there are all kinds of people there. It is the most diverse form of workforce, I would call it. Like it's like if you go in a marketing company, you will have people who come from like a marketing and communications background. A finance company will have people from that background. But in a consulting company, you will have people from any and every background. Some of the top organizations like Bain, McKinsey, BCG, Carney, etc., literally pick people from all walks of life, and there's a reason for that. They have somebody who could be a fashion designing major, somebody who could be a business major, somebody who is a lawyer, somebody who's a environment specialist, someone who's a mathematics major, or anything and everything. The reason being is that as consultants, we believe that the best solutions come when the people from different mindsets come together, because your thought processes differ when you come from different backgrounds, your approaches differ, and when you put all these different people in the same room, there will never be just one solution, there will be multiple solutions, and that put together will help you get the best solution. And while this is the great side of it, the downside of it is that everybody again comes with a very different mindset, a very different work habit, very different social backgrounds and everything, and that sometimes makes working together slightly challenging. For example, somebody who's a lawyer would want to go by the rule book no matter what, whereas somebody who is a management graduate and has always known how to do jugaad will want to find a work around everything. Someone who is a fashion student or like a graphic designer would want to just focus on making everything very aesthetic. And these clashing objectives and priorities sometimes make it difficult to work in a consulting setup. And how one really goes around it is by focusing on the solution, focusing on what is the result we're trying to achieve, and working like having a very very solution oriented approach, respecting each other, respecting everybody's differences and accepting them with their differences. And over time you'll realize that when you're put together in a team, each one finds their own strengths, and then it's really about playing with your strengths and putting together something that the client is going to like. So always think, don't ever take these things personal. Somebody could be really short tempered, somebody could be really lazy, somebody really likes to work from 6 in the morning, while somebody doesn't start their day before 3 p.m. And while most companies have set work hours, a lot of times as consultants, because it involves a lot of traveling, you're on client side. And there, after like official work hours also, you're expected to work. Somebody will be like, I can't do it right now, but I can wake up early in the morning and do this. So that is a combination of adjustment, sort of figuring that out is very dependent team to team, but the only advice there would be to say to always respect the other person, respect their opinions, respect their beliefs. You could come in with different religious, political opinions. Don't get into it. Just focus that on what you're there for, to get the client the best solution, to grow as an individual and to grow your skills. And know that in a consulting environment, you're never a part of the same team for more than one project. Every new project will have a slightly different team, and these things keep switching up, which is good, because good and bad both. If you really like your team, you have no option but to move to the next team, and if you don't like, then well, good for you. So yeah, it's about really embracing diversity, and I think over time you just get used to it. And to me, I think it's been great because I've got to work with people from such diverse backgrounds, learn from them, and I think that has helped me broaden my horizon, broaden my perspective, and really think differently. So that's about it. Can we move to the next slide? Great. So now, this is, I touched upon this briefly earlier, but how do you actually build that trust and credibility, that you work very smoothly with the client? Like I said earlier, active listening. So you have to obviously keep your ears sharp open. Think about what the clients are actually saying. What do they mean by what they're saying? Sometimes you have to read between the lines. They may not always say everything explicitly. Ensure that before you start the project, you gather enough information about the client than just what's mentioned in the scope of work. Do your secondary research, read up on news, read up, maybe talk to somebody from your organization who's previously worked with this client but is not on this project. Ask them what was it like, how do they work, what is the nature of the people like. Gather as much information as you can so you go in completely prepared. The next thing is to log every touch point, every meeting that you have, every interaction that you have, note down the minutes. So everything is in a log. So then at the end of the day, nobody can come back and tell you that, oh, but this didn't happen. Oh, there weren't enough meetings. So log everything, keep the client in the loop, focus on empathy, understand where they're coming from, and always prioritize timeline the client needs over your needs. And of course, unless it's an emergency situation where you really can't help it, I think delivering on time is something that really puts a good impression, that showcases your commitment towards their betterment, and that's what is really important. Create communication expectations. Like I said, you have to adapt your communication, but you have to always also create expectations. You need to tell them that, hey, we'll be sending you emails on a regular basis. It would be great if you can revert in uh, you can revert within 24 hours, or we will be having a check-in every Friday, and it will be great if all your team members are present. So it is about creating that communication, and creating the communication expectation and communicating it to them beforehand, so it does not come to them as a surprise. And it's about really empowering. As a leader, it's about empowering your entire team to speak to the client. If the team lead only keeps speaking, then the other people are going to get bored. They're going to think that I'm not important enough. I'm doing all the work, but yeah, like I don't think the client knows anything that I'm doing, or nobody knows. So if somebody's worked on a particular aspect, let them own it. Let them talk about it. You can always be there to jump in if something is missing or something goes wrong, but give them that opportunity to grow themselves, to learn, and to feel that they own this project too. And that's the only way you can get your team to like wholeheartedly commit, work long hours if required. And the last thing is gifts and surprises. So legally, of course, there exchange of gifts and all of that is considered bribery, but what I mean here is that if you're going to the for a client meeting, like take in a box of chocolates, take in some sweets, or if it's Diwali, for example, like get them some Diwali goodies, which anyway go around in offices. So it's about doing these small things and really making them feel like you genuinely value them. Yeah, any questions here? I have a question in the chat box. How do you handle an angry customer? So How do you handle an angry client here is that, so there are two reasons where a client can be angry. One is because of something that's completely unrelated to you and they're just putting their anger on you and they've had a bad day. And the second is that something you've done has gone wrong or has not been as per their expectations and they're angry about it. In the first case, there is not much you can do. You kind of just listen and let go. If you think this is not a good time to interact with them, you can tell them that, hey, thank you for your time, I think we're done here for today and we'd love to schedule another meeting next week, or saying that, totally understand that there are these other issues going on, we'd love to schedule and come back some other time. And then the second reason where you have made a mistake or your team member has made a mistake, own up to it. Apologize for it, tell them we're really sorry that it was not meant to be going this way, we will act upon it immediately and we will rework this, like apologize, own up to it, and promise that you're going to get to their expectations as soon as possible. I hope that answers your question. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, now it's about managing client expectations. There are times when the client expects you to be available 24/7 for them. There are times when the client expects you to work above and beyond what the scope of work says. There are times when the client expects you to do something that's really out of budget. They're not paying you for the work they expect from you. So in this case, you have to be honest from the beginning. And like I said, it's always better to under promise and then over deliver. So only promise what you think is genuinely achievable within that budget, within that time frame, and with the resources you have available. However, at some point in the project, you feel like, oh, maybe you can give them one more deliverable. Maybe you can do one additional thing without really stretching in any way, then do it. Like, go for it. But always only promise what you can do. Try to before every meeting and before any of these negotiations, try to anticipate what their requirements will be. Try to think of, oh, this is what the industry is like right now, this is where the client's financial situation is, maybe this is something they'd want, or maybe this is something that they'd not want. So always try to anticipate but don't assume. So when you do this exercise mentally, you'll automatically be able to come up with answers and justifications which you can put forth in your meeting. The next thing is continuously communicate and openly, and always make communication the number one priority. Written communication, oral communication. I've been stressing on this again and again, but communication is literally the one and only key to cracking consulting as a career. And last thing is to set goals, limits, and expectations. Have milestones. If your project cycle is for 6 months, have milestones, have limitations in terms of, this is what my team will be able to do, this is what my team will not be able to do, and accordingly set their expectations. This is pretty straightforward, simple. Can we move forward? And yeah, now is about, how do you always be result oriented. There can be a lot of noise in between. There can be situations when there are politics within your team, just lots of disagreements, taking sides. There could be two senior people in the team having ego clashes. There could be issues with the client. And then with all that noise, with all that chaos, how do you ensure you're always result oriented? You have to make sure the work you're doing, you have to make sure the problem you're answering is always smart. Now, again, this is also a very, very common framework. I'm sure all of y'all will be knowing about it, but it is very important when put into practice. You have to make sure that anything you're working towards is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Don't work in the air. Don't work without an objective. Don't work without knowing what am I trying to achieve, and within how much time. Is this realistic? Is this really reasonable? Will my team and I be able to do this? So think to yourself. And if you ever feel that, oh, this makes no sense, this is completely vague, I don't know why are we doing this, then go back to your manager, go back to whoever the team lead is, and clarify it till you are able to tick all these boxes for any work you're doing. And can we move ahead? Yeah. Coming back to it, as a consultant, feedback is the key. And now it's about how you receive feedback, right? Like, you have to always receive feedback with a smile on your face. You have to be open to feedback, and in fact you should be the one going out there and telling the client, telling your manager, saying, hey, this is what I've worked on so far, I'd love some feedback. Can we please schedule some time for a quick feedback discussion? It's always better to get feedback, because that will help you improve as a professional, as an individual, not just about helping the team or helping the work. This is something which is really important for you individually. And the moment you start shift feedback to a really positive sense, it'll make a whole lot of difference. Because, like, this measure says feedback can make us better or better, and we have to work towards feedback making us better. And if you are bitter about a feedback today, you will never improve even 5 years later. But if you take it with the right spirit, if you take it in positively, then bit by bit, 5 years later, you will reach a point where you will be giving that feedback to others. But if you are not open to feedback, if you're going to take it negatively, if you're going to think, oh my god, I did so much work, he's still criticizing it, he still didn't like it, or they've still dismissed it, if you're going to have these thoughts, then it's not going to help you. Trust me, the manager doesn't care, the client doesn't care, they need their work done, and it's not going to help you in any way. So yeah, I think with that, I come to the end of our discussion today. I will answer Vritti's question and talk about a time where I have actually dealt with a difficult client. But before that, on what I've discussed so far, any questions? Okay. So I'm going to talk about a time. This was about 2 years ago. I was my client was pharmaceutical manufacturer, and we were building a supplier scorecard dashboard for them. So now what that means that it was like a pharma giant, one of the top pharmaceutical manufacturing companies, and they make, like, hundreds, thousands of drugs and medicines, and for that they have like thousands of suppliers who give them specific ingredients. Now the issue there was that they were not able to identify which is a good supplier, which is a bad supplier, and they wanted to actually rank these suppliers on their performance. And so to do that, we built a dashboard using Tableau, which is a data visualization tool, to show them that within each of their product categories, how many suppliers do they have, and how are each of them ranking. And how we actually did that is by looking at what are the different metrics, which are important to them to evaluate a supplier. Some of them involved what is the cost, some involved what is their time, like their delivery time, some involved quality checks, how many of them actually pass our quality checks, etc., etc. There were multiple metrics, each of them were given weightages, and we built this entire dashboard, and that really showed them, okay, these are, the result, the outcome of it was that, okay, these are the top 5% suppliers in A category, these are the bottom 5, etc., etc. So now, while working on this project, what really happened is that and this is a very, very data driven, tech driven project, required a lot of back end data management, plugging in of different kinds of softwares, etc., etc. Very, very complicated, time consuming task. Now we had nearly prepared our framework, we had nearly put in all these metrics, all the weightages, and the only thing that was left is to do the front end, which is to visually present it, which is the easy part. And we thought that, okay, let's check in. All these guidelines came from the client, okay, in a document, saying these are our different categories, these are the metrics, these are the weightages, use this. Now, so we put it, and we thought before we actually put it on our front end dashboard, let's just check it with the client, double check it once. So we went and showed it to the client, and then somebody from their senior management comes by and looks at it and says that, oh, but why haven't you included this? Oh, but why is this so important? I don't think we should take this. And they just completely change the entire backend workflow. They change all the weightages, they change all the important metrics. And when we tried telling them, but this is what we first got from you, and here is the email that we've received from you, he tells us that, yeah, but this is not something I approved. And then the manager who was in touch with us, she was there and she was looking at us. So all we did at that time, in spite of being extremely angry because this was weeks and weeks of work, we said, okay, thank you for your feedback, let's see how we can work on it. And then that manager came, she apologized, saying, like, I didn't know he would want it differently. And after that, what we did is that we and this was one of the first few projects we were working on with that client. We eventually got on to multiple other projects, but the mutual sort of agreement we came upon is that in every email we need that super boss mark. We need a written sign off from him on any instructions that you give us. And then she agreed upon it after that one time blunder. And unfortunately, it was really difficult, but we had to work on it again. We had to put in extra hours. We had to find a way to make it happen. And it did all work out well. But yeah, those couple of weeks were really difficult when you finish something 95% and you have to go back to scratch one. But yeah, this is something that does happen. So I have some more questions. While working on a project, we get to know that we have made unrealistic promises. So how are we supposed to rectify such mistakes? The first thing, you have to think about what you're promising before the project. But I do understand sometimes when you get working to it, you realize that something is just not really possible. I think a good way to handle it is to obviously get on a meeting with the client, tell them that, hey, this is what we'd spoken about earlier and this is what we'd agreed upon. However, after deep diving into it and doing some more analysis, we realized that this is something that's really not going to work out. And these are the reasons why it's not going to work out. Maybe there is a technology challenge. Maybe there is just like in case of like when you're helping somebody with expansion, there are issues which are related to rules and regulations in a particular country with the government. So I think having these tangible reasons really helps, which really helps you justify and tell them that you're not just saying no up in the air. You've done your work, you've done your research, and unfortunately, these are just limitations which are not in your hands. These are external limitations which are not in your hands, which are not in the client's hands, and there's nothing that you can do about it. I hope that answers your question, Karthik. We have one more question which says, how does one deal with politics, ego clashes with the client and the team? So, interesting question. This pretty much happens always. What also happens a lot of times is that, your client may be a friend of your manager or your partner or somebody in that organization, or maybe an enemy. They may have worked in the past together. So you realize this as you sort of grow older, go higher up the ladder. You network, meet a lot of people through multiple channels. Some of them are in your good books, some of them are in your bad books. And when that happens, it's challenging. But I think the only way to get through that is to be professional. Don't let your personal judgments about people, personal opinions come in the way of work. Be extremely professional. Don't make bad remarks. Don't try to badmouth or talk behind anybody's backs. There are times when you don't like your manager because he's done a certain thing or committed something to the client that you can't actually deliver. You don't badmouth him to your colleague. Don't do that. That just sort of complicates the situation in a professional setting. You never know who's going to say what behind your back for their own personal gains. The only way is to continue reminding yourself that you're here to get the work done, and that's it. Ignore, I would call all of this noise, ignore it. Ensure that you don't have that ego. If other people are having ego clashes, let that happen. Sometimes when that happens with your boss and the client, there is not much you can do, and in that case you have to just follow what the boss is telling you. Avoid getting yourself in that situation. If you are, be professional. Don't let the other person know, don't let the client know that there's some kind of resentment that you have towards them. Be extremely professional. It's literally about maybe using that as an opportunity or chance to mend some things that may have happened in the past. So always be professional, be positive, think about how can you convert this crisis into an opportunity. The next question is how to say no, for instance, and your team members are not on the same page on a specific task. How do you convey without hurting their ego? Have you been in such a situation? Yes, I have been in such a situation many times. This is something that always happens. I think as individuals, we all have our personal sort of preferences, personal choices, things we agree with, things we disagree with. And at such a point, I think it's important to think about why you're saying no. Are you saying no because it's going to be of you have some personal agenda, or are you saying no because it's genuinely bad for the team or genuinely doesn't make sense? In the first case, don't say no. In the second case, yes, do say no, and explain to them, again, justify to them that these are the reasons why I don't think this is a good idea. These are the reasons why I don't think we should be pursuing them. And there may be a situation where they will have counter reasons to say why you should pursue something. Listen to them, be open minded to listening to other people with different opinions, with different perspectives, and for all you know, they might come up with something that you may have not thought of and that actually makes sense. In a situation where you're a leader, you're leading a team, and you absolutely disagree with something, I think you need to be slightly authoritative at that point and make them comfortable by saying that, look, I have heard you, I hear you all. However, given this particular situation and given the timeline we have, or given the current limitations, I have decided that we will not be going forward this route, or we will not be doing this. In a case where you are not the boss, in a case where you're reporting to somebody, it's okay to have an objection. It's okay to put your views forward, but their call will be the last call. And have I ever been in such a situation? Yes, I have been in such a situation. I think this is there was a time when I was in a job, and I had some family emergencies where my grandmom was hospitalized, and I just needed to be a little more at home than normal. And this particular manager of mine expected me to work until 8, 9 p.m. The work, my office was 1.5 hour commute from home. And that was really not feasible for me because I genuinely wanted to be there for my family. There was a lot of hospital things to take care of. So I told him that, saying for the next couple of days, I will have to leave work a little early, and I'm happy to work from home once I've just taken care of some responsibilities and work extra long hours at night to finish the work. But I will really have to leave office at 6 o'clock no matter what. And he said that, just was a very unempathetic guy. He said that, look, I don't care about your household problems. This is, the client expects us to do these things, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I understand and I agree, and I will do them. All I'm saying is that I will do them from home and I'll still have it with you by the next morning. And he didn't agree. And then there was a day where I told him that, I'm really sorry, but at this point, family is priority. And I really hope you respect that and understand that. And I'm going to have to leave at 6 p.m. And then he went and he sort of complained to my partner saying, she's not respecting authority. She's just left. And the partner called me saying what happened, and I narrated this incident, and I said that, I've been working here for 1 year. This is the only time I have really requested something, and this is about my family. And what would you do if, your mother or grandmother were hospitalized and your family really needed you? And I said, at least I'm not asking for leave, give. And if you don't want me to leave at 6 p.m., then I'm just going to take leave for the rest of the week. And then he understood and he apologized and he said that, okay, don't worry, do what you need to, which is best for you and your family. So I think in such situations, you really need to learn to put your foot down and tell them, and ensure that they're not taking you for granted. um okay, how does one deal with, okay, there's one more question, I think. So this one was from Aishwarya. The next question is that there could be a situation where we're working hard, we might get one-on-one negative feedback. How should we reply? I think when you get one-on-one negative feedback, that is much better than getting that negative feedback in a group, and that really means that the person genuinely cares about your impression in front of others, cares about your emotions, and it's best to receive one-on-one negative feedback. How you respond to it is, firstly, thank them, tell them thank you, and I am really glad that you could, openly, transparently tell me all these things. I think I may have completely missed out on them, and I'm really grateful that you've brought them to light. I will work on them, and if you don't mind, can you tell me what's the best way to move forward from here? And I will ensure that these mistakes don't happen again. And so really thank them, ask them about what best you can do going forward, and take it positively and move ahead. That is the only way of learning. Don't feel so bad over it, don't feel sad over it, don't be like, oh my god, I really worked hard, how could he suspend it? Because respect the fact that they've been in the industry for a longer time than you have, they have more experience, and they're only here to trying to help you, right? If they could have simply like just tone it down and said that it's not working, do it again, but they're actually taking the time out to give you feedback. So respect that, appreciate it, and take it positively. um What's the best way to tell the interviewer that you are unable to answer a particular question without looking ill prepared? Does beating around the bush work, or being direct benefit more? It's always about being direct. Don't beat around the bush. When you beat around the bush, it shows lack of structured thinking. It shows that you don't know what you're talking about. You're all over the place. So when you're not prepared for a particular question, or when you don't know something, the first thing you do is tell them that, hey, thank you for this question. I haven't actually really ever thought about it. Can I get a moment to think about it? Take that time. In most cases, you will be able to come up with a logical answer, but in a case where you can't, you can tell them that, I think I'm going to need a little bit more than a few seconds to think about this. Maybe we can come back to this later, and I'll definitely reflect on this, but at the moment, I don't think I have an answer. I don't think I have the right answer for this. So best to be direct, best to be honest upfront. um Vritti, how was your experience dealing with international clients? How do you deal with cultural differences? Great question. Dealing with international clients and international teams. So I have been in a situation where I work with international teams and work with international clients. I think cultural differences again comes to sort of respecting those differences. For example, Germans are known to be extremely assertive, extremely headstrong, wanting, they want exactly what they want. But for example, I once worked with somebody, with a client from Sweden. Super nice people, very friendly, very respectful. So now these are like two, poles apart cultures that you will see. And same thing there, respect their cultures, understand where they're coming from. It will be a bit difficult to adjust initially, but always show that, yeah, I would love to collaborate with you, it would be great to work together, it would be great to learn more about you. So, and always ask about what their expectations are. Always ask about, okay, what's the best way to reach out to you? In India, we are kind of used to just picking up the phone and calling anybody anytime, be it a client, be it a manager, or the whatever. but they really don't work like that. So it's always best to ask, okay, what's the best way to communicate with you? What's the best way to schedule meetings in case of an emergency? How do you think I should reach out to you? Because sometimes whatsapping them comes across as intruding their personal space and they are not okay with it. So it's best to clear these expectations in the beginning. It's best to let them know that you're here to build a partnership, you're here to collaborate, you're here to help them and to learn from them. So that is something that really helps working with an international client. Working with an international team, on the other hand, is slightly more challenging because everybody has different work habits. Like, I currently at my job, I work with an entirely international team. I am the only Indian. I work with one person from UK, one person from Italy, one person from Portugal, and one person from Venezuela. So it's literally like as diverse as it could be. And whereas as Indians, as Indians, and based on my previous work experiences, I was pretty much used to like, oh, like even if 6 or 7 o'clock is the end of a work day, I would maybe continue working for like another 1 2 hours or 5 hours if required. But for them, like 6 p.m. is a hard stop, and they don't expect you to bother them after that unless it's an emergency. So just understanding what where they come from, where they're but sometimes in a Indian workspace, people just make jokes on each other, they get friendly and stuff. But in an international workspace, people might take offense. And again, that really depends from culture to culture, from person to person. So in the beginning, it's best to take it slow. It's best to spend more time listening than talking. It's best to build an individual connect with each of them, and it will take slightly longer to ease in. It will take slightly longer to feel comfortable, but over time you will get there. And I think it's great because you just learn so much about different cultures, and over time that only makes you a better leader. um Okay, Arun Saxena has a question saying, what challenges did you face while working on with pro bono clients? This is actually a great question. So, as the founder of Consult for Humanity, we work completely pro bono with organizations in the social impact space and in the development space in India. And and this is obviously something that you guys, as 180 degrees, are trying to do. And I think that the main challenge there is that sometimes people don't take you seriously, and this is a bigger challenge, especially when students are working, because they're not paying you, right? So they don't think that when somebody is paying you, they really want to extract everything from you, so they really cooperate. But in a case where it's pro bono, they don't take you seriously. They are not as disciplined as they should be. They try to, they somehow have these thoughts of like these confidentiality things come into play. They might think, they might not be the most eager to share their information to you. There might be a lot of hesitation in sharing confidential details, especially when it comes to their finances and other things. So these are some of the challenges which you do face working on pro bono cases, and working in the social impact space as a whole. I think it's extremely unstructured. It's extremely unstructured, and it's very, very different from working with a professional client, with a corporate client. It requires way more empathy and compassion to be able to put yourself and understand why they're working towards a particular cause. Where is it that this person is coming from? Is it a personal story? And then trying to work towards a solution. And again, the only way to bridge that gap is to tell them that you care about that cause, that you care about their mission as much as they do. And that's why you're here to help them. You're here to use your expertise and your learnings to benefit the community in a positive way, and to really tell them that you're only there to help them, and you want to do this because you want to make a difference and you genuinely believe in what they're doing. Yeah, that's I think that was the last question. Anybody has any more questions, any last thoughts? Okay, I guess then I think that's about it from my end. If anybody wants to reach out, has any questions regarding me, any questions about my journey, any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. You also feel free to send me an email. I'm going to type my email ID here in the chat box. Feel free to connect at any point. I'll be more than happy to help. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, Sharmi. I mean, that was a really helpful session, and thanks for kind of detailing out all of your experiences and, like, giving us those comprehensive answers. It was really easy to associate with all the examples you gave because you kind of detailed it out really well. So thanks a lot, and thank you for being here. Um, Aishwarya, Ahan, if y'all want to add.
No, I think
Yeah.
a brilliant session. We got to learn a lot, and especially I was pretty intrigued by the whole methodology which you followed while explaining about how to go about interviews. I think a lot of people, especially in a college like HR, they have achieved a lot, but they don't know how to put it out there, and that's exactly what you taught us. And like really great, we are really grateful for that. Especially we got someone finally who could give us an insight on the social impact consulting space, dealing with pro bono clients, cross-cultural differences. So that was pretty brilliant. Thank you so much, Sharmi.
No worries. I think if you guys can master the art of working with social impact clients on pro bono projects, trust me, you'll be more than prepared to work with corporate clients. The level of projects will be higher, but you will feel so much at ease because they are way more structured than pro bono cases. You guys are doing a great job. Good luck with all your projects going forward. And if you need any help at any time, just feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I think Aishwarya would like to conclude.
Yeah. So thank you, Sharmi, for this insightful session. Like, thank you for taking your time out on Saturday afternoon and present us today. We have gained a lot of information, like which we don't usually learn in college. So yeah, thank you for that. I will also like to thank Pooja ma'am and Kanupriya ma'am for always supporting us. And at last but not the least, thank you for all the participants for joining in today. Thank you so much, guys.
Great. Bye, guys. Have a great weekend.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.